Madam Speaker, I move second reading of Bill 106, an act to proclaim the month of July as an Egyptian Heritage Month.
Mr. Sibbawi has moved second reading of Bill 106, an act to proclaim the month of July as Egyptian Heritage Month pursuant to Standing Order 98. The member has 12 minutes for his presentation. And just a reminder to all joining us today, we don't allow participation from the galleries. And I return to the member.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. As the first Canadian parliamentarian of Egyptian origin in the Canadian history, I am so proud to bring Bill 106 forward, an act to proclaim the month of July as an Egyptian Heritage Month. If passed, it would recognize the contributions of thousands of Egyptian Canadians to the growth of Ontario and of Canada. Egyptians came here to integrate and work hard for a better life for them and their families, and they have done so. Ontario is a great province that provides to its citizens the chance and the opportunity to achieve their goals. Currently, more than 300,000 Canadian Egyptians who call Canada home chose to live in this great country to lead a prosperous life for generations to come. Egyptians came from a background that is known for their resilience. Madam Speaker, Egyptian Canadian cherishes the values of social and physical responsibilities. This is aligned with our core value of Canadians and our government. In fact, Egyptians here in Canada are one of the highest educated immigrant communities per capita. The eagerness to learn is a trait embedded within many Egyptians. As many learned during their childhood, we were taught the value of diligence. Many in the Egyptian community are mostly doctors, pharmacists, and engineers. The community has a great level of academia and has achieved great strides towards professionalism and business development. Madam Speaker, any professional international graduate immigrant to Canada spends his or her first 3 to 4 years in average to certify his or her credentials, get licensed, to be able to get back to his original profession. When I first came to Canada, I started working at Tim Hortons coffee shop, night shifts for months until I acquired my first information technology job. I continued working hard until I became an IT professor. Now I'm proud to serve as a member of Ontario Parliament. This is a similar story to many immigrants. In addition, majority of Egyptians came to Canada as skilled immigrants, contributing to our diverse economy. The Egyptian community has followed the great example this country and this province has put forth, that of diversity, but more importantly, opportunity and hard work. If we look around Ontario, specifically at Mississauga, we may see how the Coptic Egyptian community built many community centers. These buildings were built for the sole purpose of prospering our community. The Coptic centers serves as a community hub to offer various services, from kids daycare, senior care, schools like Fulubatir Christian College that celebrated its 20th year anniversary just 2 weeks ago, networking groups of professionalism, family counseling, financial and legal aid, libraries, newcomer settlement services, the Egyptian Museum in Mississauga that has authentic pharaonic monuments replicas, Coptic Museum of Canada in Scarborough. Madam Speaker, there are more than 30 Coptic Egyptian centers around Ontario. They not only help the Egyptian Canadians, but the community as a whole. They provide necessities they need to be able to move forward, both in socially and as well as economically. A great example of this is an organization called Mississauga Training Center, which provides its recipients the requirements they need in order to gain their credentials, as well as as well as they teach them skills that are needed in order for a newcomer to enter the labor force. Madam Speaker, all that was built by community donations, run and managed by volunteers. Madam Speaker, 24 years ago, I was welcomed in the airport by a volunteer. He introduced me to another from the Coptic Egyptian Center, newcomer's office, who helped me settling by finding an apartment to rent, while another volunteer helped me to rewrite my resume and applying for jobs. Same office still exists today, just different volunteers. Madam Speaker, Egypt is well known for its pyramids and Nile River, but throughout the history, Egypt has played a central role as a birthplace to some of the world's greatest civilizations and a mix of complex and unique cultures such as Pharaonic, Coptic, Hellenic, Roman, Ptolemaic, Byzantine, Islamic, French, and British empires. It has served as a beacon and a hub for knowledge and education to many of the cultures and civilizations, from the Great Library of Alexandria and Alexandria University to Al-Azhar University. It was a land of refugees, from Abraham to Moses, to Joseph to Jesus. And as the Holy Bible says, out of Egypt I called my son. It has also played a vital role towards the flourishment and the growth of three of the Semitic religions in the area: Jewish, Christianity, and Islam. The bill referenced the month of July because it is in line with the Egyptian National Day celebration that happens on the 23rd of July, specifically as a dedication to its rebirth as an independent republic. Madam Speaker, many people seek to immigrate to Canada, and especially to Ontario, because it's known for its diversity. The majority immigrants looking to immigrate to find a new home away from home. I myself grew up in Alexandria, a city with a great diversity. When I was in school, I was introduced to so many different cultures of people that surrounded me on a daily basis. I had friends that are Jewish, Armenians, they were Jewish, Armenians, German, Italians, and Greeks. That's why when I moved to Ontario, the sense of multi-diversity, the sense of belonging that I felt back home, I found it here in our Ontario. I was once an immigrant myself, looking for an opportunity that would present itself to help me move forward with my life in every aspect. I have to admit, getting to where am I today was not an easy. Yet I'm also glad to say that because of the growing numbers of Egyptians moving to Ontario, many opportunities and services have been implemented to further the lives and careers of many. Madam Speaker, did you know that as I stand before you today, and as of this very moment, there are no legislation that have been passed that notes the contribution of Egyptian Canadians in all of Canada? Yet in my riding, Mississauga Erin Mills is the home of more than 6,000 Canadian Egyptian residents. In fact, there is an even bigger population of first and second generation Canadians with Egyptian roots. It is important to note that the largest Egyptian population in the country is present in Mississauga. Madam Speaker, the Egyptian community has come a long way. When I first arrived to Ontario more than 24 years ago, all the changes that have taken place, all the milestones the Egyptian community has achieved, is all thanks to the chances this great province provides. Together, we can embrace diversity, as we have done countless times. And want to show again today, Madam Speaker, I would like to take this moment and address all of the Egyptian Canadians we have here in the legislature today with us. My friends, as Canada continues to grow, so does our community. There is a reason why there are so many of us present here in Canada, and not in any other country. When many of us were looking to relocate our entire lives, we were looking for security, fairness, prosperity, freedom of religion, freedom of speech, for a country that will not only give us opportunities, but a community that would actually encourage us to take those opportunities. I encourage you to continue to thrive, build, and grow. It is through our diverse communities of the Canadian fabric that shows our strength. These communities are building bridges, strengthen our economic and cultural ties with the entire world. The Canadian Egyptians are a powerful engine that help pushing our Ontario and Canada towards prosperity. The Egyptian government is in recognition of the importance of the expertise and contribution of Egyptian origin worldwide citizens. And under the new president introduced the Ministry of State of Immigration and Egyptian Expatriates Affairs after 20 years of its being cancelled. Today, the Egyptian government has communicated on the highest level through a call I received today from the Minister of State and Immigration of Egyptian Expatriates Affairs, Honorable Nabila Makram, to thank me and the Government of Ontario for recognizing the Egyptian contribution to Ontario and to Canada. Through you, Madam Speaker, and to all of the members of this legislature, let us show the world what are we made of and how we seize the moment when a bill like this one I am presenting today presents itself. The Egyptian community has come a long way from when it was first initiated its growth within our diverse province and within this great country. I'm encouraging all members of the legislature to support and help me pass this bill. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Order. Further debate. I recognize the member for Kitchener Centre.
Thank you so much, Madam Speaker. It is with such great pleasure that I stand today and speak in support of this very important bill. As the member has already pointed out, Egyptian Canadian community members have come to Ontario and built a life for themselves that also gives back. For those that don't know, I am the official opposition critic for anti-racism as well as citizenship and immigration. And so when this bill came to us and I had an opportunity to speak to it, I was quite excited because it's really important for us to celebrate the contributions of Egyptian Canadians and to take a moment to recognize all that they've done to further our medicine, what they've done to further our academic lives, what they've done to further our the realities in our communities, all of that wonderful stuff. But what I'm hopeful for is that a bill like this isn't the end, that we're not going to end this discussion simply with celebrating, but that we'll recognize that we actually have power in this House to make some of the challenges that many Egyptian Canadians have experienced in Ontario less. So I'd like to give an example. When I graduated from high school, I was quite excited to get my first full-time job. It was in an intermediary company between insurance companies and doctors' offices. It was called Hooper Homes, Portomatic, and it was out in Scarborough. And my boss, my very first boss, was an Egyptian Canadian. She was a doctor. She and her husband had their own practice in Egypt, and she had come to Ontario looking to further her medical career here, to bring some of the art and the different ways that they were doing medicine in Egypt right here in Ontario. However, she ran into some issues with her credentials being recognized. And by the time I met her, she had applied to med school 5 times. First time was denied access to medical school because she had studied in Egypt. The next time they said, okay, we'll take into consideration that the studies in Egypt are something that are beneficial, but now we think you're overqualified. So then she had to then reapply and reapply and reapply. And by the time I left, I was there for about a year and a half, she had finally just gotten accepted into medical school. That story and that experience and watching her have to go through that is something that has lived with me in the work that I do, because she was practicing in Egypt and she was recognized for how well she was practicing medicine in Egypt, but here encountered an obstacle that we think that we're doing something about by speaking about, but in actual terms in this House, we aren't necessarily putting forward legislation that would ensure that the next Egyptian Canadian that arrives, the next person from Egypt that arrives who is a doctor, who wants to practice here, is not having to be confronted by the same kind of systemic barriers. And I think that it's really important for us to recognize that, because we can do better. If we truly believe in the contributions of Egyptian Canadians, and if we truly believe that they deserve all that Ontario can provide and that we grow because of that, then we should be passing legislation the next time round that says, and now let's address the barriers that new immigrants face when they come here. Let's no longer attack settlement organizations, which is something that has happened in this House. Let's not put forward legislation that's going to make life harder. Let's recognize the beauty of Egyptian Canadian contributions, and let's do better. And I'm truly blessed and honored to be here to support this bill. Thank you.
Further debate. I recognize the member for Ottawa South.
Thank you, Speaker, and it's a pleasure to speak to Bill 106, establishing or proclaiming the month of July as Egyptian Heritage Month. And I want to congratulate the member from Mississauga, Aaron Mills, for bringing this forward, and say hello to everybody who's here in the galleries around. I'm sure he's got a few guests here today, and there should be. Say hi and thank you for coming here. I was fortunate to be able to have sponsored a bill called Lebanese Heritage Month. And I didn't realize how important that bill was until the community came forward and said to me, we'd like you to do this bill. And I'm glad that it passed. And I think it's a Bill 106 too, which is a bit unusual. It's really important that we celebrate each other. I represent a community, as many of my colleagues do, that's exceptionally diverse. People, families who identify from coming from 125 different countries, First Nations, Métis, Inuit. 90 languages are spoken in Ottawa South, so we live together, we work together, our kids play together, and we celebrate together. And so these Heritage Months are really important opportunities for communities to come together, to celebrate the heritage, to pass that on to your children, your heritage and sometimes your faith, or the faith in nations. They're very, very important things because they're often a big part of celebrations, right? Churches and mosques and synagogues and places of worship are often the center of where we celebrate our heritage. So I'm really proud to support this bill. I'd like to say a few more things, but I'm splitting my time with the member from Guelph, and so I have 14 seconds left, now 13. No, he's coming for another bill. But I just want to say, I want to congratulate you. I support this bill, and thank you very much for bringing it forward.
Further debate? I recognize the Minister for Tourism, Culture and Sport.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. It's truly a great pleasure to join the member from Mississauga, Aaron Mills, to support this bill to formally designate July as Egyptian Heritage Month here in the province of Ontario, and for it to be recognized as such annually henceforward. I want to join MPP Sibaway in welcoming our esteemed guests to Queen's Park today as we debate this legislation. So welcome to Queen's Park. Madam Speaker, when the daughters and sons of Egypt first arrived here in Canada, they brought with them the heritage and culture of one of the world's most ancient and revered civilizations. Madame la Présidente, dès leur arrivée ici au
as soon as they arrive in Canada, daughters and sons of Egypt bring their heritage of a very old civilization and admire throughout the world.
Visitors to our great province learn of history, the history of Egypt, and most specifically about the age of the pharaohs by touring the extensive archaeological collection right here up the street from the legislature at one of the province's true gems, the Royal Ontario Museum. There, they can begin to understand the immense role played by Egypt and its people in the story of the human race and in the development of the civilization we know today. On that note, I would like to invite everyone to an important special exhibition at the ROM coming up in 2020, the Egyptian Mummies Exploring Ancient Lives exhibition, which will present unique insights into the artifacts and the lives of this fascinating culture. But of course, Madam Speaker, the designation of July as Egyptian Heritage Month recognizes more than just the archaeological treasures and the cultural heritage of the land of the Nile. My colleague has already acknowledged the significant contributions made by Egyptian Canadians through Ontario's history. Over many decades, Ontario's Egyptian community has produced leaders in every field imaginable, from medicine to business and commerce, to sports, to education, to politics, and the arts and entertainment. Au fil des décennies,
Pendant des décennies, for many decades, the Egyptian community had some important people and contributed to many fields, including academia, medicine, pharmacy, nuclear energy, etc.
Of a new hit movie in the theaters right now, a live-action remake of Aladdin. And when Disney was looking for a young actor to play the lead role, they selected Mina Massoud, born in Cairo, raised in Markham, and a natural movie star. Quite the achievement for an Ontarian. Madam Speaker, Ontario's Egyptian community is rich and varied in its culture, as the province of Ontario is. Last month, I was honoured to be present at Markham's St. Maurice and St. Verona Coptic Orthodox Church and Cultural Centre, the first multicultural, all-English Coptic Orthodox church in North America, as it was officially recognized as a significant tourist attraction in Ontario. We recognize the valuable contributions of both Ontario's Egyptian Coptic Christian and Muslim communities to our province's cultural wealth, vitality, and economic success. As Minister of Tourism, Culture and Sport, Madam Speaker, I invite all Ontarians to learn more about the rich heritage of our neighbours of Egyptian origin and the contributions they have made and continue to make to our province. Madame la Présidente,
Madam Speaker, as Minister of Tourism, Culture and Sport, I would like to invite all Ontarians to learn more on the rich heritage of their neighbors of Egyptian origin and on their contributions that are done and continue to be done to our province.
We'll take the opportunity to support this bill and to celebrate Ontario's Egyptian community. Thank you. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you.
Further debate, I recognize a member from Humber River, Black Creek.
Thank you, Speaker. I'm proud to be given the opportunity to speak to this bill to honour Egypt's long and proud present and history. For who among us were not captivated by ancient Egypt? I want to thank my friend, the member for Mississauga, Aaron Mills, for tabling a piece of legislation which will further enhance the beautiful and diverse ethnic tapestry of Ontario. Many words have already been said today about Egypt, its wonderful people, and its renowned and important history. My contribution to this debate is an ode to ancient Egypt, for it has filled my childhood with such lifelong wonder, and I would also like to share a few words about my Coptic Egyptian brothers and sisters in faith. Flowing northward from the heart of Africa, the Nile, our world's longest river, separates into a lush and fertile delta before emptying into the Mediterranean Sea. It is indeed the unique geography of the Nile, with its predictable flood cycles and lush farmland, that gave birth to one of the world's first great civilizations. The ancient Egyptians saw the Nile as the source of all life. It was where, in their mythology, the god Osiris was betrayed and murdered by his brother Set, who was jealous of Osiris's power and popularity. It was said that Set tricked Osiris into lying inside of an exquisite sarcophagus and threw the lid on top and cast it into the Nile. When Osiris's wife Isis was preparing the herbs for his revival, Set hacked his body into pieces and cast them all across Egypt. There are so many beautiful stories and myths from ancient Egypt. This simple myth is but a twinkle in Ra's great eye. We all know the story of the pharaohs and the pyramids, which are still standing more than 4,000 years after they were built and are rightfully considered one of the great wonders of this world. Architecture so advanced that some went so far as to contemplate the extraterrestrial as the source of its creation. Countless excited visitors were mesmerized by the 1979 King Tutankhamun exhibit in Toronto. I remember my mother taking me to see it, and it was one of the first truly great moments of wonder in my young life. The Ram's Egypt collection contains nearly 2,000 artifacts and are a constant draw to this day. Today, Egypt is the most populous country in the Arab world, and Cairo the largest city in Africa. More than 90% of Egypt's nearly 100 million citizens still to this day live along the banks of the Nile or in the Nile Delta. Egypt is also one of the world's great tourist destinations. Each year, millions of tourists from every corner of the earth flock to Egypt to bask in the splendor of its awe-inspiring historical sites, artifacts, and wonderful culture and hospitality. Today, the vast majority of Egypt's citizens are Sunni Muslims, but Egypt also has a large Coptic Christian minority. Copts also form the largest single group of Egyptian Canadians. Unfortunately, some who arrived were fleeing past persecution. The Canadian Coptic Association estimates that there are 35,000 Coptic Christians living in Canada who worship at one of the many Coptic parishes here in Canada and throughout Ontario. Coptic Christians were amongst the earliest adoptees of Christianity. According to tradition, St. Mark the Evangelist, who traveled to Alexandria in 49 AD to form the Church of Alexandria, which would become the first Coptic Orthodox Church, would serve as its first pope. By 300 AD, Alexandria was one of the world's major centers of Christianity. The Egyptian Coptic Church became autonomous in 451 AD and at the Council of Chalcedon, and today the Egyptian Coptic Orthodox Church is still based in Alexandria and is headed by spiritual leader Pope Tawadros II. There are many amazing people of Egyptian heritage who have made incredible contributions to Canadian society, and Egyptian heritage is known and respected throughout the world. In a way, it is informally celebrated always. But this legislation will provide us the opportunity to take the time formally to celebrate Egyptian heritage and culture together. Thanks again to my friend from Mississauga, Aaron Mills. I'm very, very proud to support this.
Further debate. I recognize the member from Mississauga Centre.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. It is such a pleasure to rise today in support of my esteemed colleague, the member from Mississauga, Aaron Mills, and speak to Bill 106, an act to proclaim the month of July as Egyptian Heritage Month. I would like to welcome all esteemed guests and clergy, and especially Mr. Milad Mikhail, the CPC candidate for my home riding, Mississauga Centre, who is also of Egyptian heritage. Welcome. Madam Speaker, I support this bill wholeheartedly because I have personal and first-hand experience with how much the Egyptian community has contributed not only to my riding of Mississauga Centre, but also to the vast cultural landscape of Ontario and Canada. As an emergency room nurse, I have come to realize that many of the medical staff I work with, such as doctors and pharmacists, are of Egyptian origin. In my years working alongside so many of these skilled and dedicated individuals, I had found Egyptian Canadians to be tremendously hardworking contributors to our community. Many of us think of Egypt from what Hollywood has showcased, pyramids, treasure hunts, mummies, and ancient mysteries. But the truth is, Egypt and Egyptians represent a unique and diverse culture, and Egyptian Canadians are our colleagues, neighbors, and friends. Egyptian Canadians are actively contributing to the fields of medicine, arts, education, community service, and most recently, politics. Madam Speaker, our very own member from Mississauga, Aaron Mills, MPP Sibbawi, is the very first representative of the Egyptian community to be elected to a government seat in this esteemed assembly. Congratulations. The 50,000-strong Egyptian community has existed and thrived in Mississauga for a very long time. The Coptic Egyptian Community Center has been serving Mississauga for 35 years, providing and welcoming meeting and gathering place for everyone to enjoy, use, and benefit from. Speaker, I still remember the very first time I stepped into the St. Mary and St. Athanasius Coptic Orthodox Church and met with Father, or Abuna Angelos. It was the Feast of the Nativity several years ago. The church was packed with over 1,500 worshippers and families. The sheer joy and religious celebration, coupled with beautiful singing of the worshippers, was so heartfelt it stuck in my memory. I was welcomed so warmly, and this moment was the start of my lifelong friendship with the Egyptian Coptic community. Recently, I attended the 20th anniversary of the Philopatir Christian College, a non-denominational Christian institution dedicated to providing all of its 360 diverse students the best in academic and athletic achievement. I would like to congratulate their principal, Phoebe A. Vaspi, on her leadership in education and faith. Speaker, diversity is at the heart of what makes Ontario such a unique and special place. We all bring something distinctive to the table, such as our skills, worldviews, and experiences. What we learn from our fellow hyphenated Canadians informs our daily lives and makes us better citizens and public servants. I believe that in the spirit of diversity, we should acknowledge and celebrate the unique and distinct presence and contributions of the Egyptian community in Ontario. Madam Speaker, I congratulate my fellow MPP from Mississauga, Aaron Mills, pardon me. I am proud to call him my colleague, and I fully support Bill 106, an act to proclaim the month of July as Egyptian Heritage Month. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Further debate, I recognize the member for Beaches East York.
Thank you, Speaker. It's an honor to contribute to this really important debate, and I want to start by thanking the member for Mississauga, Aaron Mills, for bringing this bill forward. When I used to teach diaspora studies at the University of Toronto at Mississauga, I taught a great many young people who were members of the Mississauga Egyptian community, or I should say communities, because they came from all the very many diverse communities that make up the Egyptian community. And then later, when I did the study for the Mosaic Institute on the perception versus reality of imported conflict, again, I spoke to many members of the Egyptian communities, including a great many Coptic Christian Muslims who are now here in Canada. And I think that it's really important to note that along with all members of other communities of people who come to Canada from conflict, people from Egypt expressed the same kinds of things about the mechanisms that are here in Canadian society that allowed them to begin the journey towards healing, healing from the trauma of what had occurred to them back home and beginning to feel whole and complete. And at the same time, that same study demonstrated a lot of the issues that my colleague, the member for Kitchener Centre, was talking about. It's so important as we go to pass this bill that we think about going way beyond celebration. Yes, it's important that we acknowledge and that we celebrate and that we respect everybody and everybody who makes up what we refer to as the Canadian mosaic, all of us who live here, who've come to Canada from different parts of the world. But it's important that we go beyond that. And it's important that we go beyond the framework of thinking about whiteness, if you will, as the default normal. It's important that we change the perspective, that we put ourselves in the minds of the folks who are here in Canada whose backgrounds are not Western Europe or not Europe at all, because it's the only way that we are actually going to attack those systemic barriers that my colleague was talking about. And it's really significant. It has to change our perspective, it has to change our systems, it has to change our frameworks, and it has to change our very language. You know that 46% of children who are of Arab descent live in poverty in the GTA, and that is largely not because of the abilities of their parents, but it comes specifically because of these barriers that are there that make it difficult for people to achieve their full potential. So we really need to think seriously. Yes, passing a bill like this is a good step, but it is only the very beginning. It is changing that framework. We need to change the language we use. We cannot talk about people who come to Canada as refugees, as illegal border crossers, no matter how they come here. It is perfectly legal for people to come to Canada and to claim refugee status, and we need to give them the honour and the respect of acknowledging that. Because when we call them illegal, we serve to delegitimize them, and that actually helps to enable the hate that we know is growing out there in the world. So I think it's wonderful that we're passing this bill, and thank you again to the member for bringing it forward. And let us now really take this seriously and take the very many next steps that we need to truly respect and honour everybody who lives in this society. Thank you so very much.
A reminder to all members that the side conversations are very distracting while I'm trying to hear those who do indeed have the floor. Further debate. I recognize the member for King Vaughan.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I appreciate that. In my greatest attempt to speak the language of this brilliant civilization, Taya Masur, Viva Egypt, and all 300,000 people. You could applaud. No one else can applaud, Shri, but I want to thank every single one of the Egyptian Canadians, 300,000 people who proudly hail from Egypt. I've not spoken to, but I see Father Angelos, who's here, a leader in the Coptic community. It's great to see you, Father, a leader of many, many people of faith. Let us not forget the history made in this Parliament when the member from Mississauga, Aaron Mills, was elected a short year ago. This man, in addition to being a leader in small business in his community, is the first member of Parliament or member of provincial Parliament, the first in any Parliament in this country, any province or the federal government, to have been elected a man of Egyptian Canadian heritage. That is in itself something that all parties should celebrate, because we have many firsts in this House. I see members opposite first themselves applauding, and I think that unity of spirit is relevant and compelling today as we celebrate the contributions in every field of human endeavour that Egyptian Canadians are making to the development of this country. Madam Speaker, the Minister of Community, Culture and Sport spoke about the rich civilization. The member opposite spoke as well about the history of the civilization and what it meant to him from Humber River as a young boy growing up, the inspiration of Egypt in the iconic minds of so many young people. And I think it is telling that this member was able to bring a Roman to celebrate an Egyptian. That takes leadership, and I have to applaud you for what you've done. But, Madam Speaker, all jokes aside, it is people like the member from Mississauga and Mills. It is people like Dr. Hoda Al-Marogi, an Order of Canada recipient, the first female in Canadian history to earn a degree in industrial engineering, the first female dean of engineering at a Canadian university, the first female employed as chancellor for the Canadian Ministry of Defence. This is the product of Egypt's community in this country. It is women and men like that that make a proud difference. And so I conclude, Madam Speaker, with a notation of gratitude for your leadership and an expression of thanks to every single Egyptian who made this country their home, for helping to build the most pluralistic, free, democratic nation that is Canada. Every one of your children and every one of the members of this legislature say thank you. So thank you all, and thank you, Shariff.
Further debate? Further debate? I recognize a member from Cambridge.
I don't have a lot of time to speak to this bill, so I will try to use my time wisely. First, I'd like to thank the member from Mississauga, Aaron Mills, for putting this forward. I was born and lived many years of my life in Mississauga and got to experience firsthand the beauty of the Egyptian community. And I would like to welcome Abuna Angelos here today. It is an honor to have you. And I just was happy to see everyone come together today to talk about how much great work the Egyptian community has come together to bring to our great province. And I know the Coptic Centre in Mississauga does so much great work. Just recently, over the Christmas season, they donated a huge check to the Mississauga Food Bank. And it's the great work of this community that we should recognize today. So thank you, MPP Sibbawi, for bringing this forward. And thank you, Madam Speaker.
The member for Mississauga Erin Mills has 2 minutes to reply.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Listening to what the members during this debate had to say, it's clear that this bill is supported by all the parties and members of this legislature. I want to thank the Honourable Minister of Tourism, Culture and Sports for his great support and for speaking and endorsing the passing of the Egyptian Heritage Month Act, as well as my PC colleagues from Mississauga Centre, King Vaughan, Barriensfield, Cambridge, for speaking and supporting the bill. I also want to thank the members opposite for their support and their remarks, the member of Humber River, Black Creek, as well as the member of Ottawa House. Madam Speaker, this bill is not just endorsed inside the legislature, but I have received letters of support from multiple organizations and associations from across the province. The Canadian Coptic Centre, the Canadian Egyptian Heritage Association, the Canadian Egyptian Chamber of Commerce, Canadian Coptic Activists Federation, Flobatir Christian College, the Mississauga Christian French School, the Little Angels Daycare, the Nile Club, the Egyptian Canadian Club, the Egyptian Coptic Museum, the Coptic Museum of Canada, the Egyptian Canadian Association. These associations and organizations are all a very successful example of the integration of the Egyptian Canadians, their contribution and the prosperity and the development of our Canadian fabric. And we have them all here in the House today. Welcome in Queen's Park. Also, I want to thank all the members of the community who are attending with us here, especially our seniors. Thank you very much. We have over 100 people attending with us here now in the gallery, as well as in the members' gallery. Thank you for all of you for coming.